Welcome to the Animal Welfare Investigations podcast. I'm your host, Rae Smith, and I'm joined with the director of the AWIP, which is Jacob Lloyd. How you doing, Jacob?
I'm good, yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you started AWIP a while ago. It's based in the UK, but you've moved it
hmm
over here to the US. So why don't you tell me, like, how did you get into animal welfare in general, and tell me, like, your journey to develop AWIP.
Okay, cool. So yeah, about I've been involved in this work probably for about, I don't know, 14 years or so. So yeah, quite a while. Um, Started out really rescuing wildlife as a kid. My grandmother was heavily involved in wildlife rescue, and as a family, we always had a dog, and it was kind of, yeah. I mean, I'm an only child, so I was sort of raised by my dog, if you like. Um, so yeah, it was all sort of that, and it sort of grew through that. And then sort of into my teens, I was in animal care college and, all of those things. And I began to realize that there was a need for a real focus on organized animal crime, and investigating that and helping to bring those people responsible for that to justice. So that's how it naturally just sort of developed over time.
So, what ends up separating you from, like, the RSPCA then? That's a national group. Everybody's has known them for decades. What makes AWIP different?
Yeah, I mean, I would say first and foremost, it's our focus, complete focus, sole focus on organized animal crime. There is no other organization doing as much intelligence gathering, surveillance work, whether that be on the internet or in the field. There's no other organization that is A, solely focused on it, and probably not many other organizations, if any, that are doing it as much as we are. So yeah, it's that sole focus, rather than dividing your resources over so many different crime types in animal welfare, heavily focusing down and making a dent, because clearly, if there is estimated to be 40,000 dog fights in the United States, clearly not enough is being done. So that's what makes us different, is that focus.
Yeah, 40,000 dog fights a year. Is that what you're saying?
I know individual dog fighters,
Okay.
individual dog fighters. It's the last statistic.
Do do how like what like so you focus on dogfighting in AWIP. But you mentioned that there's other, like, organized crime. Like, so what would your, like, primary focuses be? What do we focus on in AWIP?
Yeah, so dog fighting, cockfighting, sort of animal fighting more generally. In the UK, we look at badger baiting, fox baiting, so that's using dogs underground to attack badgers or foxes, which is not only bad for the wildlife, but also bad for the dogs themselves, right? Because the
Hmm.
dogs sustain injuries, and those injuries are then not treated. So you end up with other Animal Welfare Act offences in with that. So yeah, so we focus on that. What else do we look at? The puppy trade is one, and as you know, we've got a great upcoming webinar on how to investigate puppy mills, just to get that little in there. So we have that. Um, yeah, that's about it.
And,
But you know
and AWIP is focused on training.
that too. Yeah, we do that too. Yeah. So I'm a big believer that we should be expanding capacity and training into law enforcement, in the US animal control agencies, in the UK animal welfare organizations, and across the board, really. Anybody that's involved in investigating or prosecuting animal crimes, um, to be able to give them the capacity to tackle these crimes. I mean, for example, in the US, I speak to so many police officers that say, we just do not have the knowledge. There's the will, but not the knowledge.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, that's a big problem that we see
Do you
here is
experience the same thing?
yeah, a lot. So I think unlike in the animal welfare field, like people who go in to law enforcement, like just like specifically like your beat on the ground police
Yeah,
officers. There's a lot of them who really care about animals a lot, and then you have the other
exactly.
ones who don't, but they don't get training for it. They don't know how to do investigations. They don't know how to do a bite investigation, what info to get, and they're so
Mm,
good at their human versus human calls, but some of them don't even recognize that a treadmill is used for or fight dogs, or just getting like simple reporting party information for a potential neglect complaint or something along those lines. And actually, like the other day, I had a dog in a hot car call. Just it's summer. There's a million of them.
yeah.
And I pulled up in this parking lot of Sam's Club, and there's two female officers, and they were ready to go. They were just we were so excited. We were
Put the
really
window
looking to like
through.
find these people. Oh, they were pumped. They were ready. And I pulled up and I was like, I don't see the car is gone. They're like, no, we got to look through all the rows. We got to find them. So like they're like some of them are motivated, but like once they get on scene, like a lot of them don't know what to do. And they call us a
That's
lot
the thing.
to say like, what's
Yeah,
the law? Can we take them? Can we not?
yeah.
But
I
you
mean, and I think. Sorry, I was just
okay?
going to add. I think that, especially, so you're talking about something that should be quite natural, right? I mean, to save a dog from a hot car, it could be quite natural.
Mhm.
But if you're looking at something that's more organized and in nature, in its nature and secretive and underground, how do the police tackle that? Without that knowledge, and how do they tackle it? How do they convince superiors, line managers? Everything is a bureaucratic and all about a business case. How do they convince them if they don't know what they're trying to convince in the first place?
So if you
It's a problem.
if they don't have, because you're never going to roll up on a dogfight like in progress, that just
Exactly.
so how do you in your role, how do you guys in AWIP help those officers, or yourselves end up finding those dog fighters, those cockfighters, people who are in the illegal puppy trade? How do you find those?
A lot of grit and hard work. Hours and hours. Um,
You haven't been to sleep in the last 3 months, huh?
exactly. Um, well,
You
so
know,
yeah. Um, no, in all seriousness, how do we find them? So yeah, we regularly are looking at social media accounts. We're regularly looking on forums, discussion networks, groups, all of those things. Pedigree registers, great example, especially in dogfighting. Across the board. Sorry, I have to keep fiddling with these to try and keep them in. Across the board. We're looking at all these different resources that are out there on the internet. That gives us initial intelligence or information that we can then develop and research to hopefully then progress that into an investigation that hopefully then progresses to criminal charges.
and that's what that magical acronym is that you guys call the OSINT, huh?
Yeah, so open source intelligence. Yeah, yeah. So we have a heavy focus on open source intelligence. I mean, I'm heavily involved in the UK OSINT community, for example, that not just focus on animals, but generally focus on open source intelligence. Um, I'm a big advocate for open source intelligence. I think, as we operate with limited budgets. In the animal world, in policing also, my colleagues in policing say exactly the same thing.
Hmm.
Nobody wants to spend any money, even if they had it anyway. Um, so so how can we do more work with less money? Open source intelligence is one of them. I'm not saying it's like a magic bullet. I mean, it's not going to give you everything you need to take down these people, but it definitely gives you the first steps, and it gives you that proactive insight into the dogfighting world. For example, in the last month, 2 months, we've collected thousands of social network web accounts on our intelligence database. I mean, thousands, probably tens of thousands. We collect hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands of emails, and other things that we pick up, usernames, other things that we pick up across the internet. We scrape websites for data that comes off those websites, and we put it in an intelligence database. It's then linked in like a network chart. So you can bet bottom dollar that if you're dogfighting, you're cockfighting, you're involved in wildlife crime, we already know about you. And if we don't know about you, we're going to. So it's just a matter of time.
Well, so you and I met, I don't know, the better part of what, 8, 9, 10, I don't know how many months, a year ago, whatever.
Yeah.
However long it's been, I don't know. It's been so long.
We haven't slept since then.
We can't even keep track of it. That is for sure. That's for sure. But when I first met you, I heard of this OSINT thing, and I was like, "What in the hell is it?" I'm sure everybody will eventually learn I'm the least technologically inclined person in this entire planet.
You love technology, we know.
I am a traitor to all millennials out there. But when I heard about OSINT, at the risk of sounding completely ignorant, I thought like all it is Google searches and like looking at Facebook. And that's what I thought it was. So I'm like, originally I thought, how would this be beneficial at all? Like, this is something
Yeah.
I can do. Why is this so big? Why is everybody going crazy over OSINT? Like, why would that be beneficial? And you kind of blew me away with that and the information you could find. So I have to tell the story because I think it'll make sense to a lot of people, and I think I know you know where I'm going with this.
Yes.
So,
Go for it.
and there was
Don't reveal the secrets.
no, I won't reveal any secrets. What I'm going to reveal is how me as someone who was originally skeptical of like why would this be so beneficial. I had asked Jacob a few months ago about we were chit chatting about this and that, and I think you asked me about my birthday.
That's right.
And
Yeah.
that's right. I was like, oh, do this little tease thing, you can figure it out or something along those lines. And he did, and he found my whole birthday. And then he proceeded to find a lot more things that I thought that you could never find. It was nothing bad, but it's scary when you can find your what kind of vehicle you drive, what is your address, what's your past address, where your family lives, what are their names, where do they work, who
Yeah.
you've been associated with in the past. And I was creeped out, and I was so impressed.
I'm sorry.
I was so creeped out, but it was so impressive. And I want to emphasize that too, because there, especially like in law enforcement, there are different companies that you can partner with that kind of like wipe you from the internet,
Yeah, yeah.
or so they claim. And I did that like a couple of years ago when I worked with the police department. And you still seem to find what kind of shampoo I use and all this good stuff.
Oh, thank you very much. That's a massive compliment. I think just to add to that, I think if if it's out there, we would generally find it. And so I think, yeah, and even if it's not out there, it's out there somewhere, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So even if it's not, I can type into Google and find out your car. I can find out your car in other ways. If who you've associated with, who you've lived with, so on and so forth. Facebook friends, they're a great asset to us. TikTok
Mm-hmm.
accounts, they're brilliant. We can scrape the whole of your TikTok account, all of your friends on TikTok, and we can then build out network charts to figure out, so they're friends with this person and this person's friends with this person, and so on and so forth. Um, like I said earlier, it takes you so far in your investigation. I'm not by any means saying that this produces the final product, that you then put to the court. It doesn't, but it definitely gives you everything you need, for example, for a warrant. If you're going to execute as law enforcement, if you're going to execute a warrant, you want to know everything about that place. I would, if it
Yeah.
was me, I would want to know everything. I don't know how many dogs are likely to be there,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to know how I can house them afterwards, right?
Yeah.
I want to know the people, their history, who they're associated with. What mobile phones do they have at the address? Because let's not forget, mobile phones are a big evidential asset for us, and in prosecutions. I would want to know all of that before even stepping foot in that property. I don't want to go in blind.
Do you
Um,
do so does like OSINT involve a lot of like surveillance, drones, looking at like the property in Google Maps, is that beneficial at all? Have you used that?
yeah, yeah. I mean, combining OSINT with offline activity, like drones, for example, that it's great. I mean, I can do so from my computer. I can do a bit of satellite imagery. You could just call it Google Maps, Google Earth, whatever. It's still satellite imagery. You can use satellites to determine different areas, and then what I do is I use that to give me a guide. I never take it as accurate ever, but I use it as a guide, and then I can then go and use, commission a drone operator, or I personally fly drones. You can go and fly them, and then I compare the two together. And actually, on modern drones, we can 3D map areas,
Mhm.
and things like that, and we can blow them up big. It's definitely better than my webcam. So you can do all sorts of cool tricks with it that will be useful to any potential search warrant application.
And you OSINT nerds all get together at these conventions. Is this like a secret meeting of how you can spy on people?
Well, maybe. If I told you that, then
But seriously though, you have these things and it's a way for you guys to get together and share, probably success stories and
That's right.
different
Yeah,
tactics. So
yeah.
is there has this been a growing process for you? Are there things that you didn't know about before, like years ago when you started, that now you're just like, well, if I would have had that, I would have been able to figure this out?
Yeah. I mean, when I started this years ago, I was quite young, and I think I don't know if I saw the value in planning and preparation. And you know what I'm like anyway. I mean, I just do it, right?
Yes.
So know, I have
Oh,
a training course tomorrow, no problem. Like,
he
you know what I'm
probably
like.
hasn't done his PowerPoint yet.
Yeah. Um, but yeah, I mean, I don't know if I really saw the benefit in it. In all seriousness, though, we talk light-hearted about this, but I don't know if I really saw the benefit in it. And I think actually planning and prep when it comes to intelligence gathering and using intelligence in animal welfare, even that, right? That's a weird thing. I mean,
Mhm.
a lot of when I'm talking to animal control officers in the US, law enforcement in the UK, US, or Philippines, or wherever I'm doing stuff, and I talk to them and I say, we need to take an intelligence-led approach. I get some really funny looks. They're just like, these are just dogs, and I'm like, but it's not like, I mean, the illegal wildlife trade is like the third largest crime type in the world. Dogfighting is pretty up there, I would
Hmm.
argue.
Yeah.
And in terms of harm and risk and threat and all the things that in policing you should be assessing, and also separate to that, also looking at the harm to the animals, the risk to the public, the harm to the public, right?
Hmm.
It should be prioritized exactly like a drugs investigation,
Well,
and
that's
that's
what's so
that's where I see the benefit.
interesting to me because we'll have this eventually, but talking about like the link and the connection between domestic
Exactly.
violence to humans and animals. But it's so you can think of that akin to these types of organized crime investigations, right? Like dogfighting and stuff. When you have dogfighting, the you don't go in for dogfighting. Like the best ways to
I think
find
so.
that is
Mm.
through drugs and guns and gang activity and all of that stuff. So it's like
It,
really
it has
surprising.
been up until it has been up until now, but I'm on a mission to change that. But yeah, you're right. But yeah, you're right. It has
Why?
been.
Like, is that just you think that's just like a lack in police interest, or is it just plain ignorance, or is it just that like OSINT's too new? Um, like, what is it?
It,
Why?
Yeah, it comes back to that lack of training, I think, and lack of knowledge. I wouldn't say it comes down to a lack of interest, personally. I mean, I meet so many police officers that would kick a door in for dogfighting, any day of the week. Um, you
Mhm.
know, I mean, they get so riled up about it. So I definitely don't think it's a lack of interest. I think it's a lack of training, a lack of knowledge, and also, let's be frank, a lack of time and resources. I
Mhm.
mean, how many police officers, especially beat coppers, that are on the streets, they have to do those. Sorry, I've just realized I've used like a really British term. Um, I could see you sort of laughing there. Sorry,
I tried really hard to hold it. So we're good. I love it. I love all the words. If
should you
Beat
translate? Or,
couples.
yeah, I mean, but your neighborhood police officers, right? I mean, they don't have the time or resources to look at these things, and so I think that we need to give them the tools, so that they can do it themselves. But if they can't find the time or resources to do it themselves, then we're here for them. And so we're able to spend that time. We're able to do that for them, and actually, we are building one of the largest databases, research databases, probably across the globe on animal organized animal crimes, and we hold probably more data than most other organizations, on individuals that are suspected to be involved in these crimes.
You talked about that database that you're building for animal abusers and organized crime. What
Mhm.
is that? What is it for? What are you gathering? What are you storing? Is that legal?
Yeah, so we collect open source information, so everything on the internet. We do enhance it and enrich it with other things, which are completely legal. But yeah, the majority of the information is already in the public domain. So what we do is we collect it, we store it, and then we analyze it. So we have a growing sort of database of, like I said, social networking profiles, mobile phones, email addresses, whatever, mobile phone numbers, I should clarify, and whatever else we collect. And then we use that. Newspaper articles, I mean, they're great. Newspaper articles are fantastic. I mean, you can learn so much about somebody's criminal offending from newspaper articles. Um, Court records, US, really good for monitoring various types of, modus operandi. For example, you look at something like a dogfighting case on PACER, the court research system. You look at something like that, a federal case, you will find out loads of information. So, I'll give you an example. I'll give you a practical
Yeah,
example.
give me an example.
I'll give you a practical example. So, a few weeks ago, I picked up, or I should say, our intelligence unit picked up a dogfighting case that was in the US, a federal dogfighting case. It's currently in the courts, so I won't comment on the case itself. But in terms of what we did with it, we basically researched that case. We used tools like Pacer, the records software. We looked into the case. On the file, we noticed several names of dogfighters that had been named. We looked at addresses that were on the search warrant applications or the returns, whatever it was. And then we looked through the file and we were looking through different MOs behind the offending as well. What we did is we collected those names, we researched those names using social networking websites, and from that we developed several hundred other targets.
Oh my God.
So we were able to go into their social media accounts, the ones who are being accused of this offense. We were able to go in, pull their friends, and then we were able to analyze that outcome. And we analyzed it and found several individuals, several hundred other individuals that were suspected of dogfighting. So that's a
So
really good practical example.
those other people who weren't necessarily on the police department's radar at all, that they wouldn't have known
I
about.
suspect. I suspect so. I mean, I don't know for sure, but I suspect so. I mean, a lot of those were definitely not on our radar, and they should be. And so we are now looking into those individuals, and at some stage we'll prepare evidential packages for law enforcement to action.
So that'll end up being like the end goal with this is like the big export of AWIP is going to essentially it's going to be information. It's going to be I want to call it sensitive information because it is open source, but it's almost like secret open source because it's hidden in plain view, if that makes sense.
You just
You
have to
know,
go find it.
but you're like so right. You're essentially making these packages of information of people, suspects, animals, locations, all this stuff, and you hand it over to animal protection officers or law enforcement, or the USDA or the marshals or whoever, and say, here's a bunch of great information. This is who owns these dogs.
Exactly.
These are the properties they own. This is the vehicles they drive. Here you go. It's on a silver
Yep.
platter.
Exactly that. And then from that, they're able to initiate an investigation for dogfighting, and in its own right, which is important because we need to recognize it for the type of organized crime that it is, rather than, I've done a traffic stop for drugs, and in the boot was a scarred dog,
Right.
rather than that, that sort of setup that the police often encounter. They're great because you still get them for the dogfighting charge. So, you could argue, well, does it matter which way you go about it? Because you still get them
Right.
in the end. But for me, I think it does because I think that these crimes are not valued enough. They're not given the priority and attention that they deserve. They're an afterthought. And for me, that's not right.
Well, and the resources that are required to execute a really great dog fighting, like organized dog. I'm not talking about like your backyard, you know,
Yeah,
idiots
yeah,
who are, seeing with their dogs. I'm talking about like organized to be able to
yeah,
execute a very thorough, well planned out, as safe as possible dog fighting bust takes as many resources as like a gigantic year-long undercover investigation for like narcotics
exactly.
investigations where you're busting people and
Yeah.
removing 500 pounds of meth or whatever. I mean, I don't know how much is a lot in those raids because I've never seized any meth before, but I would think 500 pounds is pretty significant.
Couple of kilos. I don't know.
But this cool though, because it's almost like it's almost like, and I can really only speak to like the US here. When we get complaints, you really start out with like nothing. You get like the
Exactly.
concerned next door neighbor that's like, I see a bunch of people coming in and out of a house, and I hear a dog that's like screaming or growling or whatever, and you go, and it usually is never ever dog fighting, and you can
Yeah.
usually tell like when you pull up, but like that's where we start. And if you end up pulling up to a situation where it actually is legitimate but you don't know it at that time, like they're not going to invite you in the house, they're not going to take you down to their
Yeah.
basement, like
Mm. Here's
so
my scarred dog. Please prosecute me. Send me to
yeah,
prison.
take a look at it. Here's all my. I don't want to say too much because I don't want to. This is OSINT, so somebody could watch this. But yeah, the point is where do you get more? Where do you get more of that? And sometimes it can be difficult to get police officers or detectives or sometimes even prosecutors to take a case when you don't have a lot of evidence, and you're just like,
Mm.
well, I got this one
Yeah.
complaint, you want to come with me, PD, to go check out this ring that I think might be going on. They're like, we got better things to do, when really it could be something extremely serious. And so it's difficult to do that when you really
Yeah.
don't have any information. So this is like, so I guess that's why I'm kind of fascinated about it, is that you can initially come up with all of these things that lead to the totality of the circumstances, and
Exactly.
give it to them and say, this is pretty solid, you should check this
Yeah.
out.
And I think also going back to your point around sort of the findings of the priorities of the police and law enforcement generally. A thing that we do quite regularly when we're collecting information is we actually store information on other crime activities that we discover. So, if we discover that they're flashing a load of cash, for example, but they don't have any, it doesn't appear that they have another legitimate income, that's of a concern. Sometimes we've even openly seen the sale of drugs on Facebook and so on. So we will gather that together and we will highlight it to the police. And of course, that can sometimes increase the priorities for them, because we know that that is a priority area for most law enforcement agencies. So we collect that as well, to try and convince them that they really should be investing in this area. Second to just convincing them is raising awareness that these crimes are interlinked, and that's really important. To demonstrate that if you're harming animals, you're harming people, and if you're harming people, you're probably harming animals. I think to demonstrate that, and likewise, if you're dealing in dogs, you're probably dealing in drugs.
Yeah.
You probably are dealing in human trafficking, and so on and so forth. Um, I'll give you a fun fact. 90% of the people we investigate have previous with drugs. Fun fact.
uh I'm not surprised.
It's true. Uh, you know. But yeah,
what
no,
what
it's true.
what's the because I think like unless I think like unless you're customs or border or like doing something international, um, there's not a whole lot of awareness about like how big the wildlife trafficking ring is.
Hmm.
And I mean, like I think like most people say like don't buy elephant tusks and stuff like that, but there's still a lot of people who go hunting and things like that. So there's obviously a lot of supporters who like, I guess you could say, legally hunt those animals. But can you talk about like OSINT and like those wildlife trafficking cases?
Yeah. So Um, First off, I'll tell you about some of the sort of wildlife stuff that we do in the UK, and then I'll sort of go on to the international arena. But sort of nationally, we look at stuff like baiting, like I was saying earlier, and those sorts of things. And you would be surprised, or maybe not surprised, at how much people share online that we're able to then identify. WhatsApp, for example, lots of sharing in private groups in WhatsApp that are not very private. You can get an invite to them.
What's WhatsApp?
So a phone app, a phone app that you can use to talk to each other. Hey,
What's the
do you know? Do you
WhatsApp?
know what a? Do you know what a mobile phone? Um,
Wait, it's an app to call people?
Yeah, or text or send photos or
Okay.
something like that.
No,
Yeah. I mean it's widely used, especially in the UK. I'm
not
probably
by
assuming
me.
it's widely used. Well, we know that you're a hermit without a laptop. Um
Oh, that's true.
um yeah. Um Yeah, anyway, so WhatsApp is used quite a lot to trade wildlife, to trade images and videos of this cruelty towards wildlife. Similarly, in the international arena, the limited work that we've done around it in the international arena is that we find that these same sort of similar setup groups, private Facebook groups, private WhatsApp groups, Telegram groups, are used to exchange information and sell animals live or dead, and sort of trading those items. So there is a wide market for it,
And
sadly.
they, I would think, because if they're hunting these trophies or they're gathering these trophies, like you want to show that it's a trophy. You don't keep
Exactly.
your trophies, in a dusty old box somewhere. You display them. So it
Other than you,
doesn't. Other than me,
when you get like all your awards for your 101 things, you put them in a box.
they go in a dusty box in the closet. Yes. See? You'd never find out if I was wildlife trafficking.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, but that makes sense though. It makes sense that there's like so much out there because they want to display, they want to take pictures, they want people to see that they're, you know,
It's
whatever.
hard to be a business like if you're involved in the trafficking side. It's hard to be a business if you can't show off your product. So you've got to have that front door to your shop, even if it's not a physical shop. You've got to have that front door to your shop somehow. And so often we find the front door to the shop is a private Facebook group, or it's a Telegram group or whatever. And similarly, if you do it for entertainment, like in the UK where we have baiting, and this use of terriers underground, again, it's normally done for ego. It's normally done to show, look at me, I'm a great man, and this is my great dog. Um, that's how it is.
Hmm.
And so similarly, you want to show that off. You want to show to people, that this is my great dog that can do X, Y, Z. Um, so it's, and let's not forget that there's also breeding involved here, right? I mean, similarly with
Oh
dog
yeah.
fighting and other things, certain winners in this world, talking about dogs, the best performing ones, if you like, their offspring will fetch more money.
I
So it's
mean,
all
so
connected with money.
it's not illegal to breed dogs in the UK. Um, what?
Well, other than for fighting purposes.
Well, other than that, but I mean, like if you're, if you wanted to breed your dog, like it's like, whatever, go ahead, have fun. Um, but
Generally.
where does that put you guys then in the illegal puppy trade? At what point in time do you get involved?
Yeah, so we look at sort of low welfare sales of puppies. So low welfare, high volume, basically. So we're looking for stuff like puppies with parvo, giardia, so on and so forth, that are being sold regularly by certain breeders or dealers. Um, More often than not, it's dealers actually, rather than breeders themselves, um, that are sort of trading in those puppies. So that's where we generally look at. We do have local authorities here, the government authorities that look at non-welfare related stuff, so licensing issues, because you do have to have a license if you breed over 3 dogs in a 12-month period.
Mm.
Um, but to be honest, I mean the license is not much to be held up for in terms of a standard, to be honest. So we don't look at that. We used to quite a lot. We used
Mhm.
to do a lot of prosecutions around that in the UK, but we don't look at that so much. We focus heavily on the low welfare, high volume.
Can you give us a successful example of one that you've done?
Yeah, I mean we've prosecuted so many of the unlicensed breeders, but I mean one good sort of one that I sort of remember is rescuing several puppies from a breeder where they had this breeder had continuously sold Giardia and Parvo puppies. So we rescued those, which was great, and that prosecution was not being progressed by us, but by another authority. So I don't know what happened with the prosecution, but I can give an example of a prosecution that we did where unfortunately, all the dogs were sadly deceased. So we didn't save any dogs in terms of that action, but we
Mhm.
brought the guy to court. His name was John Lawrence. He was in the newspapers, so it's public knowledge. And he received a prison sentence for selling German Shepherd puppies with parvovirus, and
Wow.
we were very happy to get that prison sentence. It was a short prison sentence, sadly, but at the time in the UK, you would only get up to 6 months in prison for animal cruelty. It's gone up to 5 years now, but at the time when we brought this prosecution, it was the maximum was 6 months,
Well,
and we
that's
got something like 3 months. So.
3 months. It's kind of surprising to hear it though, because I mean, we like us being in animal welfare, um, the vast majority of cases don't end up in any kind of jail sentence, or a lot.
Yeah.
The most of the time it's like, oh, it's probation for however long, and maybe a fine, or maybe some classes or whatever. But and I almost wonder what the general public thinks, because like the only stories like who make it to the news are the ones who do go to jail. And so like we get these calls all the time. People like, yeah, they got us breeding these dogs and they're all matted, and they need to be taken away and sent them to jail. And it's like, well, that's never gonna happen.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's right. Yeah, it doesn't sadly it doesn't happen. And prison sentences um are not dished out. And I can't really understand why, because if actually we increased the deterrent effect of those prison sentences, we perhaps would reduce cruelty. And if we reduce cruelty to animals, we reduce the risk towards people.
Mhm.
So it works in favor for both animals and people. I mean, I used to see this. I will admit this. I used to see this as solely an animal issue, right? I mean, I've been focused on animals my entire life, and so when I got into investigations, I was like, I'm just here to protect animals. That's it.
Mhm.
And I will admit that,
Like most of
and
us who go in animal welfare.
yeah, we just that's how we are. It's how we're wired, whatever. But now, after investigating animal cruelty for 12 years or something, I realize that actually this is a much wider issue in society, and actually it's kind of interconnected.
It's
The
usually not
abuse.
a animal generated problem, it's a human generated problem.
Yeah. And actually, if you come back to it, in terms of cruelty, if you look at cruelty generally, and like you say, it's a human problem. The person inflicting that is human. The
Mhm.
person, who is a risk, to other humans. Not just also to animals. So yeah, I think it is a human problem, even though we're there to protect animals.
And you're really wise and well traveled. You get to travel all over the world, in different countries. How many countries have you been to?
I don't know, like something over 30 or something.
Oh, something over 30. Uh, Lucky.
Something like that. I've
Do
lost count.
you, but you, so you go to these not just for fun. You go to these other countries and you train them on OSINT techniques. You train them on
Hmm.
animal welfare issues. But you probably learn a lot when you're there, from the people, from the culture, from like for those of us who never get to go anywhere fun. Um, what what is it like when you meet people from these different countries? Do you feel like they all in general like have the same shared vision of an idealistic humane world? Are there differences? Like, what's like the general consensus on animal welfare in the country all these different countries?
I think that we do generally, without even communicating with each other, we do generally have a shared vision, and I would say that that is a world without cruelty and suffering towards animals, and also I think a lot towards people, and reducing that. So I think there is a shared vision. I think that something that traveling has given me, I was not accustomed to traveling very easily. I like home. I have my animals, which I adore and I want to spend time with. So traveling was not easy for me. But something it hasn't get something it has gave me is the ability to see other perspectives, which perhaps I wouldn't be as good at if I didn't have those experiences. So, seeing that connectedness, for example, is probably a benefit of traveling. For example, I went to the Philippines. I worked on the dog meat trade. We arrested, I don't know, like 8 or 9 dog meat traders, and rescued over 26 dogs in like a 6 month period. And we did a lot of work around the dog meat trade. And when I was
Was it for
there,
the
I
Yulin
realized,
festival? Was that around the Yulin festival time, or is that just
oh no, separate, outside of,
okay?
yeah, outside of that. But one thing I realized was that certain demographics, socioeconomic demographics, poorer, sadly poorer people, would engage in these types of crimes, and so whilst I was there to protect animals, and whilst I believe that justice should still take place in those scenarios, I was also chatting to these people. Luckily, they spoke very good English because my Tagalog is not very good. Um, so, um, so luckily they spoke English. I was speaking to them and I was saying, you need to find alternative livelihoods. And perhaps if I didn't have that ground first-hand experience, I maybe wouldn't be able to look at it and go, okay, I might not agree with what they're doing. I still think they should be brought to justice, but maybe it's not as black and white as just cruelty or not, if you know what I mean. There's
Like,
there's factors at play.
like a lot of it has to do with just culture and upbringing, and that's like the way that we do things, and we don't know any different because we haven't seen any different. We haven't been able to experience a different way of life, a different culture, and how they look at animals and how they treat animals.
Yeah,
um I think that's a really good point, because we kind of see it all over in a bunch of different countries. And so like, in a lot of different ways too, in very different. So like the two
I
examples
think
I
that.
can come up with is like with cockfighting is traditionally um, carried out from those in a Latino
Yeah,
culture, right? I think that's
yeah.
fair. I don't think that that's, you know, uh,
It's
stereotyping.
historically true. It's
It is
historically true.
historically true. And that's not to say that other people don't of different backgrounds,
Exactly.
but because
Exactly.
that's the main demographic. Then, but so we look at it that way, but then we can also look at it like the way that we treat animals as like food products. So
Yeah.
most people don't eat cows in India, right? But here in America, you have a burger once a week, and that's just a different culture. Like if you've
Yeah.
never lived over there, experienced it, like maybe you would think different if you had that opportunity to have a different kind of exposure. And so that's the point I really like. And this is not in any way to be in defense of people who commit animal cruelty, but I
Exactly. Exactly.
it is that they just don't have the opportunities every time.
Yeah.
Some people don't. I mean, like there's obviously, ones who know their way.
I I still 100% believe in bringing these people to justice if it is a crime.
Yeah.
I mean, every day of the week. My job is to protect animals.
Before the last thing I want to touch on, Jacob, before we wrap up, is training. AWIP loves training, loves doing trainings.
We do.
What trainings do we have coming up that you want people to know about?
So we have the webinar this month for investigating puppy mills. In what date is it? Do you know?
The 13th.
The 13th of August.
Yep.
So we have that coming up. Look on our LinkedIn for that information. We have the Animal Welfare Investigations Conference that we're in the planning stages um, for November.
November. Yes. I don't
Um,
remember what day. I think it's
yeah,
early November. I could
check
pull it up.
check LinkedIn. And so we have that, but also just in all fair, in general, if you are law enforcement listening to this, if you are animal control or just humane society, whatever, working in the space of animal welfare law enforcement, please reach out to us, especially me. I really want to talk to you about how we can help you with training or just generally, discussion around information that we're seeing and trends. Um, so yeah, so we have some training coming up, and if you want something a bit more than what we're offering already, then have a chat with us, and we will come up with something customized.
And I do want to mention too that we are doing the other side of the coin. See what I did there? Of puppy mill training webinar in September for the public.
That too,
So anybody
I
from the
think.
public
I
can
get
attend that. Yeah.
that.
We'll
Okay.
probably do more. All right. And they're free. They're all free trainings, so go sign up for them. We love free trainings. You do too. So, all right.
Yeah, no, 100% training, I think training should be, yeah, it should be free.
All right. Well, thanks Jacob for coming on. Thanks for
Thank you.
putting me in charge of this too. It was fun.
You're welcome. Yeah.
All right. And thanks to everybody who tuned into the podcast. We appreciate it. We will be
Yeah,
releasing
thank you so
these
much.
every Tuesday. We'll have a new episode with somebody either emphasizing on investigations or any type of animal welfare topic. We've got it. If you're interested, reach out to us, of course, LinkedIn. You can find either one of us, and we would love to have you on. So thank you everybody for tuning in, and look it for us. Have this posted on LinkedIn, YouTube, and
YouTube.
Spotify.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.